Good afternoon. My name is Andy Casanave. Just a little background. Judge Ware and I were just joking about this. My entire professional career, it's been like I've been following him around. When I was hired at the DA's office in 1985, he resigned effective 1 January 86 to help start the public defender's office. In 1994, I left the DA's office and hung out a shingle, private practice, representing whoever needed my help. Did that until 2007, when Ron Ware hired me because he needed another staff attorney at the public defender's office. That was 2007. In 2008, he was elected district court judge. He left me again. Today, I'm looking for the job, different division, looking for the job he had. So when I win, guess who will have just left the district court? Ron Ware. I've been following this man since I was in my 20s. Just a little introductory information before I go into where I intend to go with this. I didn't grow up in Lake Charles. I grew up in a little town east of here called New Orleans. I moved here 1984, took a job as a law clerk for the district judges. After that year, as I already told you, I went to the DA's office. Worked for Richard Ayub for 7 years, worked for Rick Bryant for 2 years. Found that I needed to move on. So I hung out a sign, represented people, state and federal court, and it was a sudden change in my life because I learned when you're representing the government, you've got all these resources. The police are all pulling for you to win. Some of the judges are pulling for you to win, frankly. On the other hand, when you run a defense, a criminal defense, I recall my very first criminal defense case was in federal court in front of Judge James Trimble. The United States of America versus my guy. It's a different thing. The whole country versus this guy here who somebody thought was selling rocks in Mossville. Since then, I've represented a lot of people who didn't have a lot, both in private practice and in 2007, I started at the public defender's office. And I've seen some good people who were accused and some terrible people who were accused. And I've represented them, frankly, because when you're a public defender, you don't pick your clients. And so I'd like to let you all know that one of the things I intend to do as a judge, I'm sorry, I just hit the mic. I apologize to the world for that. One of the things I intend to do is strive to separate the weak from the mean. Both get accused of crimes. That person who has that addiction, or that single mom who shoplifts to feed their kids, that's the weak. Some people, though, are predators. And there are predators who steal, there are predators who rob, there are predators who rape, there are predators who kill. We got to distinguish, okay? Now I'm going to let you know right now, some of the weak kill too. Some people kill because of frustration with life. I've represented, on the trial level, 4 kids who've been accused of murder. Not a one of them was mean. They were weak. They had poor childhoods. They were not raised by people, well, some of them were not raised by people who knew how to raise children, who shouldn't have raised children. And I'm sure all of you who are parents know that that's just something, as a parent, you just got to show up and be there for your kids. And these people, these kids, their parents didn't do that for whatever reason. We've got to figure out how to strengthen the weak. We've got to figure out how to protect those young offenders to get them out of court, to keep them out of jail, to get them finishing school, to get them working, to get them to be better parents than maybe they were dealt. Because the fact is, we don't fix anything until we fix kids. Now, look, I know the children of a couple of you, and you got wonderful kids. You know, I'm not talking about your kids, but you know what kids I'm talking about, the ones who don't have anybody. So they end up on the street, and they join gangs because gangs are family, or as close to family as they've ever seen. And they do stuff that God knows I wish they wouldn't do. We got to keep families together. And we got to help kids finish their education. I don't know how many times I've stood at a podium like this one looking at a judge, and the judge asked, well, how far did you go in school? And the two most common answers are 7th grade and 10th grade. Now, if you know about the LEAP tests, you know why it's 7th grade and 10th grade, okay? Because they can't pass the LEAP test. The minimum standard for getting further in your education, they can't succeed. So they fall out of school and they do whatever, and they get manipulated. And if they find a gang, and gangs are real here, then that gang becomes their family, and the heads of that gang become their parents. And if that gang says, you have to do this terrible thing to fit in, they'll do it. Because they don't have a mom and dad they can trust to go home to. They don't have an uncle up the street they can go home to. They don't have that friendly person that they can go to. So we need to help these young people pull their lives up. And one of the great lies in this world is that people pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. Everybody here who's self-made had a lot of help. I had hardworking parents. I went to good schools. I went to such good schools that I got a scholarship toward. From there, I went to law school. I didn't make all that by myself, and nobody does. To help keep families together, we got to work on something that's very real in this community: bail reform. You know, we've got people sitting in jail for misdemeanor offenses who can't post $2,500, which means they can't come up with 12% of $2,500 for a bail bondsman. So they lose their homes. They lose their kids. They lose their jobs. They lose everything worthwhile in their lives over a few dollars. We got to fix that, and we got to fix that right away. We have one essentially court compliance officer assigned to the court. And I'm looking right at her predecessor right now. I'm not saying who it ought to be, because I think we need to find those people. But I think we need to go to about a dozen. I think we need everybody who's in jail for nonviolent stuff Get them out. Get them out of the taxpayers' money. Because every day they're sitting there pre-trial, the police jury's laying out money to pay for their housing and their food and those ugly orange scrubs. Let's get them out. Let's get them back to work. Let's give them somebody they've got to answer to. Told you all I practiced in the federal courts. In federal court, there were two answers. You were either released without posting money, or you were too dangerous to let out. That was it. I don't want to hear about a $17 million bond. A $17 million bond, unless you're Jeffrey Epstein, is a joke. Nobody can post a $17 million bond. Just about nobody can post a $3 million bond. Some of these bonds that we see set are an insult. If you can't post $60,000 and the judge sets it at $600,000, what's he telling you? He's telling you that you would be, if you were worth more money, you would deserve to be free. But since you're not worth more money, we're going to keep you locked up. We need bail reform. And we're going to need court compliance officers, a fleet of them, to help keep those people on the straight and narrow, to help make sure they're getting jobs, to help make sure they're staying sober, to help make sure they're taking care of their kids. We need to do this. All of society needs us to do this. Business people need us to do this. If you're running a store and suddenly one of your employees is locked up and the bail is more than they can afford, and I'm not blaming you for how much they're paid, because some of these bails, I don't care what you're paying them. And it's for something dumb, not for something vicious. Look, we always have to separate the weak from the mean. But if it's something like that, and you can't keep them on their job because you can't get them out of jail, and if they've got a house, they lose their house. They lose their kids. Nobody wins. Society loses. And I could tell this, I believe, to any crowd, and I defy anybody to tell me I'm wrong about this. Bail is good if you're a rich criminal. High bail. And nobody else. Okay? I promise right now, and I'm going to talk about people, they're not in office anymore. During my time in Lake Charles, I've seen 2 tax assessors get convicted of crimes. The last one, and I'm not going to lie about that, somebody made a deal. Now, I don't know anything about that deal, but I know he was stealing your money and he was stealing my money. If you pay taxes in Calcasieu Parish, he was picking your pocket. They reduced it to a misdemeanor. I'd have given him 6 months, because that's the maximum I could give him for a misdemeanor. He'd have gotten every day of 6 months that the law would allow me to give him, because he stole from the public. I don't care about anything else. If you use your power that the voters gave you to your personal advantage, I want you punished. I want you to pay for that. It's easy to, I've got to stop doing that. I keep hitting that mic. It's where I hit. I promise you, you're not going to find anybody running for judge who says, oh, I'm going to be good to brutal rapists. No. I've got 3 judicial candidates in the room right now besides me. None of them is going to be kind to rapists. That's just the way it is. But I promise you, I am not going to be the friend of the people who use their power for their own personal benefit. not the power that we as voters gave them. I am not their friend. There are other incidents, but I don't think I need to cover them. There are a lot of lawyers, mostly lawyers who don't go to criminal court, specifically plaintiff's personal injury lawyers, who have asked me, Andy, why are you running against Mike? Mike's real good to us. And Mike is real good to civil plaintiffs. He is. I used to rent office space from Mike. Mike was real good to civil plaintiffs. Always has been. Which takes us to a point. This is not about personal animosity at all. I've known Mike Casanave since law school. I've been his friend. I've rented office space from him. My son, who is here, and his daughters are friends. This is not personal. But I'm going to promise the world this. In civil cases, I will listen to all sides, and I will decide according to the law and the facts, just like I was taught ever since I was much younger at LSU Law School. The law and the facts, that's what it's about. And if the law and the facts say that this person should get $12 million, this person should get $12 million. If it says this person should get nothing, that's what they ought to get. And I will make those judgments myself, just like any other judge. I think I've seen enough life right now where I could figure that out. You know, all civil litigants, I promise. Now, I'm doing this, and I am one thing that I don't think anybody running to be a new judge can say. Under the Louisiana Constitution, I am term limited. I cannot run for re-election under the Louisiana Constitution. You know what that means? I don't have to please anybody. I don't have to make anybody want to support my re-election. If you don't support me, I'll be gone in 6 years. If you support me, I'll be gone in 6 years. That's all it is, okay? So I'm going to make the call I need to make. I'm going to do what I think is right. Nothing else. I can't be bought because, for what? You know, you're going to give me a big campaign donation for something I can't run for? I am going to be there. I'm going to give every day I can to be as fair as I can to every man, woman, and child who appears before that court. I promise this because it's the only way to be. There is no other way. If you're going to be a judge, you can either be fair or you can be a fraud. I intend to be fair to everyone. Just a couple of plugs. If you're interested in me, go to my Facebook page, Andrew Casanave for District Judge. Simple as that. That's the Facebook page. We're going to be starting a fundraising campaign. Here's the deal. For whatever reason, and this should be free, but I'm not going to complain because there would be no money for this any other way. It costs $40 to ask for a public defender. We're asking poor people who can't afford a lawyer to pay a fee to apply for a public defender. That's Louisiana law. I can't change Louisiana law. Not today. Here's what I'm asking. If you support me, $40. $40 for fairness. Very simply, I want to serve. I've represented people most of my life. I've stood next to people with nothing. not even hope. And I've tried to make their lives a little bit better, tried to improve their lot that much. And sometimes it's only that much. And sometimes I wasn't even able to get that. I've represented people who sat in jail for years. And we went to trial and they were found not guilty. And those years of their lives were lost. How do you explain to someone that they've sat in jail for 2 years? Is that a time warning? 5 minutes. How do you explain to someone that they've sat in jail for 2 years for something they've never done? For something that has nothing to do with them? Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap just in case there's a question. Take the mic, or I'll have to repeat the question.
Andy, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
As someone who is in the courthouse daily,
yes,
I've seen you there throughout my tenure in Calcasieu Parish. With the pandemic going on right now, one of the things that is of grave concern, yourself, me, Mr. Hawkins, Mr. Key, all represent defendants on very serious offenses. Mm-hmm. And as we sit today, there are no jury trials.
Yes.
How, if elected, will you deal with getting access to justice to all of these young men and women sitting at CCC who are facing life in prison, who are facing 25, 30, 40, 50 years in prison and have no choice but to go to trial?
That's a very dear question to me. I represent a young woman who's accused of something, who I am convinced if I could have a trial Monday, she'd be out of jail by the Friday. But I can't get her to trial. And I don't know what it will take. I understand the parish was in courtroom B earlier this week trying to put in plexiglass petition, see if they could put in plexiglass petitions between the juror chairs. And it appears maybe they can. There are people who want to try cases in courtroom A in the old courthouse. As the only person in this building who's ever tried a case in courtroom A, I assure you that's a terrible idea, because nobody can hear anything, nobody can see anything, and court security will hate you because the entire room is surrounded by doors. Somebody could pop in from any given door and cause mayhem. So no, I don't want anything in courtroom A because it's unsafe. And you can't have a fair trial in courtroom A, I don't believe. Courtroom B, I think, is the beginning. If we have to rent meeting rooms in the Civic Center to have trials, I'm for it. If we have to use the Chalkley Room at the Burton Coliseum to have a trial, I'm fine with it. Let's find a way. There is a way. You can create social distance. You just have to move out of 1001 Lakeshore Drive.
Got a quick question for you.
Absolutely.
What is your stance on drug testing when an offender goes to trial? I know in the past, I haven't been with you guys in quite some time, defendants would go to trial. Your opposition actually had a practice of drug screening when they would show up for trial. Sometimes they would test positive, sometimes they wouldn't. During the times that they would test positive.
Trial?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So times when they would show up and they were positive, they would be locked up, causing them to lose their jobs most of the time, particularly when they were tested positive for marijuana, which we both know stays in their system longer than pills.
Yeah.
Whereas, and he did, I will say this, I'll speak for him, he did have a practice of having them retested in a couple of days, not understanding the fact that pills burn out of your system faster than marijuana. So the marijuana offender normally wound up in jail 30 days or more, depending on their fat, versus the pill popper that would get out maybe within a couple of days. Yeah. So what would be your practice, if any, when people would show up for court as far as drug testing?
Let's move back a few hundred years. Let's move back to the British common law, which is the origin of all American criminal law, even in Louisiana. The truth is that, something wrong? Okay. The truth is that one of the cornerstones of the American criminal justice system, like the British criminal justice system, is that a person is presumed to be innocent of all crimes unless and until they either plead guilty or are found guilty. So I don't know that I, as a judge, with the exception of bizarre behavior, I'm going to make this exception, okay? With the exception of bizarre behavior, which, you know, if somebody comes in and they act like they're not right, then we're going to deal with that. But otherwise, if somebody shows up and they're just there, what's in their veins is not my business. What's in their urine is not my business. Okay? I know for a fact that marijuana, real marijuana, not synthetic marijuana, is less harmful than almost anything else a person can take. So why on earth am I looking for reasons to punish the unconvicted? No, I'm not doing that. Now, bizarre behavior is its own problem. Okay? If somebody shows up and suddenly they're screaming or yelling or whatever in court, then we've got other issues to deal with. Maybe they're mentally unwell. Maybe they're physically unwell. Maybe they're impaired by some chemical. But since we can't pursue court while that person's like that anyway, let's just stop court and let the professionals figure that out. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and that's where I stopped on psychology, okay? I don't pretend to be a psychologist. And I don't know, and I've never been a physician, and I've never been a nurse, and I've never been any of those other things. So I am not going to presume to know what's happening with that person. Is that a fair answer? Thank you.